to welcome in to ESPN FC Live on this Wednesday to Tim Vickery from Rio de Janeiro. First of all, before we get into anything, good to see you. How are you?
Yeah, I don't think I could be described as either talented or a youngster, but let's kick the ball aroround.
Yeah. What are you saying, Nicol?
No, I wondered who you're talking about because I'm like Tim. I knew it wasn't me either.
This article, the boys from Brazil, before we get into it, I've got the top 5 that I want to go through about youngsters in Brazil right now we might be seeing soon in Europe. As a kind of general rule, when you see the talent that there is right now in the Paulista, the state leagues, and the Brasileirão, in the national championships, with the Copa Libertadores success that Brazilian teams have had, how would you compare that with Brazilian youngsters that we've kind of seen over the past 15, 20, 25 years? Is this the best crop, a good crop? What kind of crop is it?
I think it's very difficult to tell because the gap has widened between top-class football in South America and top-class football in Europe. So you've always got that question mark. Are they going to be able to bridge that gap? And that gap is one of technical terms. It's one of physical terms. It's also one of psychological terms. It's not easy to live in a different country. But it's clearly a country to look at, Brazil, because it's a magnificent supplier of talent. And certainly clubs, English clubs, they are looking to buy from Brazil, direct from Brazil, much more than they were in the past. And the way that the market now operates is that the big European clubs and the Premier League clubs, they're not interested in the best players in Brazilian football. They're interested in the brightest promises. Mm-hmm. They want them as young as possible. So really 22 has become a kind of cut-off point. And this means that the process happens so quickly. I could give you the example of the centre-back now at Nottingham Forest, Murilo. He hadn't played first-team football in Brazil before the end of April. Come the end of August, he's a Premier League defender, 4 months and out. That process happens so quickly with the clubs looking to spot talent. Is obviously this is going to be a scattergun approach. Not everyone is going to live up to the expectations, but there are enough there, I think, in this list that I put together to make you think, yeah, Brazil has a good generation of players, much stronger, though, in some positions than in others.
Stevie, when you were growing up, when I was growing up, Tim was growing up, it's a lot harder to watch these young talent coming through from basically countries that weren't the countries that we were in because it wasn't on TV. But now we're seeing loads of these youngsters on satellite television, online. But one thing that's definitely changed from when you started to play and you made the breakthrough at Liverpool after signing from Ayr United, it was a different game back then in that these type of talents weren't as protected as they are now as far as the laws of the game are concerned. So is European football a far more attractive destination now that players aren't going to get butchered by centre-backs that knew they'd get away with a couple before the referee spoke to them?
Yeah, I think no question from a physical standpoint, you know, younger players are able to survive for the reasons that you just mentioned. You know, the fact that the actual physical contact is way less than it used to be. There's more space. You kind of get more time on the ball. And so, yeah, for all of those reasons, I would suggest that a younger player can get more minutes on the field, particularly in a place like the Premier League. You know, again, I think it also helps that in the Premier League now, there are so many diverse cultures and types that it's also easier for a younger player to come to England as opposed to going to Spain, which kind of seemed to be the destination. Obviously, Spain and Portugal, because of the language, because of the culture, obviously makes it easier for particularly younger players to go and settle and mature and grow up. So because of the finances, you know, teams can spend more money on scouts, so they can spend more time in these places looking at these young guys that they never used to be able to afford to do. Mm-hmm. And so I guess all of those things together is probably why we're seeing a lot more South Americans, and certainly a lot younger South Americans, both in Europe and particularly in the Premier League as well.
Tim, I want to take you back about a decade and to the Paulista, to the Brasileirão. at ESPN, we were fortunate enough to have the rights to do commentary on the Brazilian games. And I remember certain games at Santos were delayed. The second half was delayed so that Neymar could come out with various sponsors' products that he had, because there were so many people involved in his deal, in him. This was before he'd even gone to Barcelona. And that was the impact then. That was 10 years ago. Is it similar that there's loads of people, agencies, companies invested in these young Brazilian talents, knowing they want a piece of the pie when they move to Europe, or has it moved on slightly?
Well, in the case of Neymar, I think, and he could have gone much earlier.
Yeah, he could have done.
They held him back a little bit, and he went in, and he could easily have gone 2, 3, even 4 years earlier than he did. And part of what you were seeing there was the cost of keeping him. All of the commercial side that was necessary to pay his wages. And at that time, Santos scrapped their women's team just in order to be able to be able to afford Neymar. That wouldn't happen these days because he'd already be gone.
Yeah.
And the European clubs, that they really want them at 18. If they could get them younger, that they would. If they could rip them out of the womb, they would. But they like them at 18 if they can. Now there are pros and cons with that one, because you're taking a young man, often very young for his age, away from his home country. Think of all the changes that you go through at that time. It's hard to go through all those changes in a foreign country. But on balance, the clubs think it's easier to get the player to adapt to life on the field and off it. Sometimes I worry when these players are loaned out because they've come up the ranks being special. They're the special one. And if they're loaned out to a club that maybe doesn't have a long-term stake in them, they can wither a little bit. So it's a difficult process. You're dealing with human beings. There isn't a one-size-fits-all approach to this. But certainly there's enough talent there for the clubs to be interested.
I'm going to take a look at 5, your top 5 from your Boys from Brazil article. And I think there's 21 in there, but players that we might be seeing soon in Europe. At 5, you've got Pablo Maia. He's a 21-year-old central midfielder from Sao Paulo. John Kennedy's at 4, not the Celtic assistant manager, Stevie, someone who's rather younger than him, a 21-year-old striker from Fluminense, who's done so well with the Libertadores and goals and red cards galore. Number 3, you've got Marcos Leonardo, a 20-year-old striker from Santos. At 2, Victor Roque, an 18-year-old striker from Atlético Paranaense, who's likely to go to Barcelona. And Endrick, the 17-year-old talent from Palmeiras, who's likely and will go to Real Madrid. Of those 5, who excites you most? Oh,
Endrick is the special one, and he really is something special. Although, interestingly, talking about physical contact, he's with the Brazil squad now for the first time. They play Colombia tomorrow. They at home to Argentina next Tuesday. And we got some fabulous footage from training where there's a moment where Gabriel Magalhães, the Arsenal centre-back, just cleans him out. You know, it's like, welcome to the big league. But Endrick, he's a stocky little left-footed striker with you know that thing that the great player has. He just sees things so quickly. It's almost as if time is slowed down, and you can see that with Endrick. He's got blistering acceleration. He's full of audacity. He came to attention as a 15-year-old, scoring fantastic goals in a very good national under-20 competition at the age of 15. He was put into the Palmeiras first team last year. He's had some struggles adapting. If we were having this conversation a month ago, we'd be saying, well, yeah, he still hasn't really, in the last few weeks, he's just been sensational. Palmeiras from nowhere now top of the league, and that's because of him. And he really is a very, very special talent indeed. So Endrick, I think, is really the one to watch.
Stevie, I remember you ended up in South America with Paul Mariner on a coaching, well, it wasn't a coaching tour, it was a tour to try and find some talent. And you said the best performance was actually seeing the Police and Sting at the Bombonera, because the rest of the guys that you watched weren't very good. What are you looking for in a youngster? If an MLS coach or whoever from Europe, from America went down to Brazil, what are you most looking for from what you can see during that 90 minutes that you watch?
I mean, initially you're looking for something that somebody can give your team. After that, just raw talent. I mean, unfortunately for Paul and I, the problem we had was the size of the wallet we brought. It wasn't quite big enough, and so when you're asking questions about young players, you know, they would just look at you and go, "No, you can't touch that. You can't touch that. You can't touch that." I mean, so we would the mistake we made was going to the wrong places. We should have gone to a level where we might have got somebody, because MLS, with all due respect, even for Brazilians who want to get out of wherever they are, you know, they're looking higher than that, and so that was the mistake we made. But as far as looking at talent, I mean, Paul and I came away a little disgruntled, to be honest, because there was so much of it that we could have got some team sheets, shut our eyes, thrown a dart, and we could have got a player who would have been so good for us. But we just couldn't afford them, and that's the problem that the majority of scouts, coaches that go down there have, is because there is so much talent that unless you've got the money to back it up, you ain't getting close to it. But as I said, as far as you know, apart from seeing the police, to be able to go and watch young players whose the desire is incredible. You know, you're talking about Gabriel cleaning Endrick out, and that's at the very highest level. Well, these kids, the desire and the way they trained, I mean, this was like electric. From the first minute of training to the last second of training, never mind the games, you could see the desire and the look in these kids' faces. I mean, it was so enjoyable to watch, because if there's one thing there's not enough of, in my opinion, and a lot of the youngsters here, is that desire and determination to be the best. They all want to be the best player that's ever lived. They don't just want to be professional players. They want to be the best. It's great to watch.
Tim, when Endrick goes to Real Madrid, he's got Vinny Jr., he's got Rodrigo, but he's also got Jude Bellingham, who's only 20 as well. Will it be a seamless transition for him?
Probably not, no. I think he'll be brought along slowly, and that's the way to do it. And one of the advantages of a squad like that is you're not putting too much on him straight away. Let him bed in. I mean, someone who will join the club at 18 clearly has time on his side.
Stevie, this has been a bit of a love fest for the young talent and looking ahead, and Jude Bellingham and all these Brazilians. It's time to throw a curveball, time to throw a spanner in the works. Not all Brazilians are good. There was a player at Celtic. Now, I've got to be careful here. Rafael, I'm going to say Shaid.
A bit of a blanket statement.
Kenny Dalglish signed him for $5 million for Grêmio. He got 3 Brazilian caps, and it's SCHEIDT. The pronunciation in Glasgow, Tim, was not Shaid, because I tried to commentate on him. He wasn't very good, was he?
Well, and people still remember, and I did say this in a previous century, that I thought he'd be all right. He could play, but what he couldn't do, this gets to the heart of the thing about being good in certain positions. Brazilian defensive lines, still to this day, they play very deep, very deep. So there's lots of space on the field. That's one of the reasons why Brazil is producing so many strikers in wide spaces at the moment, because those strikers have acceleration room, able to show their stuff. The centre-backs, all of Brazil is producing good centre-backs, but all of them are developing outside Brazil. And that even goes back to, say, Thiago Silva. When Thiago Silva went to Milan, he couldn't play for the first few months because they had too many non-European community players. So I think they just worked with him on playing higher up the field, because even with someone of his pace at his peak, when he was back in Brazil, he would sit almost on top of his goalkeeper. Someone like Rafael Shaid, in Brazilian football, he could do that. He's slow. The ball behind, it's the goalkeepers. And he could play out constructively off both feet. He could dominate the space in front of him. But you take him over to Europe, you make him play 30 yards higher up the field, and the football is faster and more furious and more intense than anything he's used to. Absolutely lost. So that's the reason why all of the good Brazilian centre-backs now are developing outside the country. and there are some centre-backs playing in full-time, in big clubs, first division football in Brazil, you think, how on earth is this player a first division player? Fullbacks has become another problem position, really, because the Brazilian fullback was a little bit like Stevie Nicol on Mirandinha's debut for Newcastle, the first Brazilian player to play. So he ran into Stevie Nicol from fullback, who was the hat-trick hero. Brazilian fullbacks were wingers. Now they've got the wingers back. They've got lots and lots of wingers. So what does that mean for the fullback? What does the fullback have to do? So there's not a lot of young fullbacks coming through at the moment while Brazil sorts out what a fullback is. So there's a kind of unevenness in this talent, although I think you'd expect most of the list to be strikers, because strikers mature more early, it's less of a collective endeavour, and it's also what the market wants.
I'm going to finish with a game in just a second, a top 5 game, but top 5 of the worst, and I'm going to give you the 5 in a second. Before that, Mirandinha's debut, Stevie Nicol. That game was on a Sunday. You missed a family wedding to score a hat-trick instead, didn't you, against Newcastle? I
did. I was supposed to give my twin sister away that day, and the game got switched to live TV, and so unfortunately, my sister had to look elsewhere.
The only reason I know that, Tim, it's in his book. It's a good read. You should try it. Okay, your top 5. I've already read the best ones that are up and coming, led by Endrick. I'm going to give you 5, and you've got it in no particular order. Yep. You've got to put them in the worst to not as bad. Okay,
this is a bit like expected goals. It's transforming everything in statistics,
nonsense.
Isn't it?
Don't ask Stevie about expected goals. Okay, here we go. The 5 in any order. Alfonso Alves of Middlesbrough. 2 goals against Man United in his 5th appearance for Borough is probably as good as it got. Andre Santos, Arsenal. Best remembered for asking Robin van Persie for his jersey at halftime at Old Trafford. That's a no-no. Kerlon. He's still known as the seal dribbler because he could dribble the ball in his head. Nothing to do with the fact he was rubbish at Ajax or Inter. Denilson, remember when Real Betis broke the world transfer record to sign him from Sao Paulo? And Kleberson, a World Cup winner in 2002, but Man United fans, they don't remember his time at Old Trafford as well. Okay, what's your 5 in which order?
Well, number 1, the best, has to be Denilson. And he was... he has a World Cup winners medal. They're not given away at sweetie shops. And Betis paid over the odds for him, and it put too much pressure on him. And how often do wingers carry teams? Wingers don't carry, especially 20-year-old wingers don't carry teams. So it was a flashy mistake from Betis that put too much pressure on him. But I think he had a good career. 2 would be Kleberson, who never again achieved the level of performance that we saw in the 2002 World Cup. Partly that might be personal characteristics. Also, I think at that World Cup, everyone who played the European season was a busted flush. He was in the middle of the Brazilian season, and he had a physical advantage that he really made tell. So I think perhaps that competition put him on a level that he wasn't really up for. But he went to the 2010 World Cup as well. And he had 2 feet, and he was mobile, and he had a reasonable career. 3, I'm going to go with Alfonso Alves. Scored a lot of goals in Holland.
He did for Heaping, yep.
Yes, I never like it when players are attacked for not coming off at a certain club or whatever. I never like that because, he did well enough at other clubs to get the opportunity to go to Middlesbrough. 4 will be Andre Santos, who was the kind of fullback that Brazil was producing at that time. He had a nice left foot, but he really wasn't a great defender. And 5, I'll go. Kerlon was so unfortunate, and this is the big problem with doing lists of young talent, because Kerlon, he got famous for this seal dribble, but he was a complete package at under 17 level, which can be a treacherous level. Under 20 is much more reliable than under 17. But he had his ankle absolutely smashed, and he was never the same player again. So that wasn't any lack of talent or desire. It was just the misfortune to suffer an injury that seriously undermined him as a football player. And that has to be a cautionary tale for any young player. It can all go wrong in a moment.
Stevie, final thoughts?
It's a bit of a sad note to end on, but at the end of the day, that's the truth. You know, we can talk about all the talent, and you were talking about Bellingham and everybody else, but you know, at the end of the day, it can change that quickly. You're one bad injury away from not having a career. So yeah, a very somber ending, I should say.
You want to tell us a joke then?
Well, I'll tell you what. When we went, I signed a Brazilian at the New England Revolution.
Okay.
And I remember the president, Senor Galati, coming up to me after he'd made his debut. He said, "You know what? You've got some talent, haven't you?" I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "You're the only person that can go to Brazil and find the one player that can't kick a ball."
Yeah.
I was like, "Cheers, thanks, Neil."
That'll do us. A nice way to end it.